Okay, well, happy Chinese New Year. Happy water, what you call Year of the Water Tiger. So, okay, so does anyone have anything they'd like to share this morning or ask any questions or um, comment on anything?
Yeah, so I'm tired this morning, and to the extent where wasn't able to really like get my body, what do you say, like movement wasn't like helping me wake up initially, like with the cardio at the beginning, and then I was noticing you using your eyes in the Taoist yoga portion and looking up, and I noticed my eyes didn't want to look up as far, and I started playing with where they did want to look, and kind of came out of that exploration was that they wanted to look and dart back and forth and do all sorts of weird things, like you know. And then I found out actually my whole body wanted to move a lot faster, which was weird because it was kind of counterintuitive for being tired, and it actually for the first time like wanted to move faster than yours does. And I was like, because usually the pacing is a little fast for my system, but at least today I noticed I wanted to go faster and felt kind of like reckless and not how you're supposed to do it. But at the same time, I'm wondering if that's actually what your experience is like, where you're following your body. I know sometimes you need to slow down just to let your system feel things. But in this case, it felt like I needed to speed up, that it was doing something for my nervous system too. So that was my experience. And I guess my question is, do you have any guidance about the eyes for the Taoist yoga portion? And is this kind of exploration, is this kind of what you do? It just looks different for where I'm at in the moment.
That is a great question. Okay, so I want to say what you did is exactly what you're supposed to be doing, that kind of exploration, and then following that, and then following the speed, and depending on what your system needs, how you need to move and what you need to do will actually change. So the Taoist yoga portion is actually a bit complex. So traditionally, actually, you're supposed to look in very specific areas and then hold the posture until your body releases. But then there are other Taoist yogas that I've learned where you have to bring in movement into it. And if I were to say there are three distinct, at least three distinct Taoist yoga ways to do the Taoist yoga within our school, because I found that as I learned these different methods, there were three really different ways to approach it. One is the alignment and extension method. One is the alignment and the visual method. So like the alignment and extension method is actually you look where you're extending after you align. And then the alignment and visual method is actually where you align yourself comfortably, and then you look in a certain direction with the movement, and you actually go to the 8 corners of the eyes, and you release your eyes, and you actually release, you look inside your body, and then you feel the inside of your body actually releasing, the tension in the inside of your body releasing. And then the other one is what I typically cover, which is the movement, where you're bringing movement while you're in a posture to the joints so that they release. And so there are 3 broad ways to do it. One is to basically aim and then, basically extend and reach. And then 2 is to basically look and release the inside of the organs. And then 3rd is to move and then release the joints. And really, actually, you need to be able to do all 3. And if you only have one of them, I find that it's actually limiting. But if you have to have one, it's better to have either the movement or the release better than the extension. I find that the extension is the least useful in terms of actually just being able to get a balanced state. But having said that, if you don't have the extension, on certain days, the other ones are useless. That's why it's so difficult to say that. So those are like the three broad ways to go about it. And the focuses are a little different, but the more important thing is actually what you did, which is actually you follow, and then the day tells you what you should use. And it's actually, you know, and that's one of the reasons why our system always falls back into following what actually comes up for you in that moment. Because if you do, then it's going to cover all the 3 main portions of how you do the yoga. So, because see, even though there are 3 broad, so and then as you get better, then you bring in the pressurized breathing, you bring in the central column breathing, and then you bring in visualization, and it gets actually more and more complex until the yoga loses form, where, you know, for most people it becomes too overly complex, and then it becomes just actually a different posture to practice it in a heat. And that's actually really, you know, what it becomes, because it's kind of like, you know, one of my teachers said that kind of the way you want to look at all practice. He gave me a basketball analogy of all things, actually. And he said that it's kind of like learning how to do a layup, ideally, but then in order to be able to play the game, you need to actually practice being able to do the layup from every possible position while someone is coming at you. And so, you know, in some ways, the goal is to be able to kind of live from the state and live from your inner heat, and actually more. And, you know, if you sit and you're in a meditative state, you might think, and I think this is actually the genius of Tai Chi, and this is actually why I love Tai Chi so much, because I feel like it's a lot more in a line with, you know, what we're finding out about how the body works. And so there's this assumption that if you just sit, one day your sitting will be enough, and then your sitting will carry over into, you know, the rest of your life. And for some people that actually is true, and if you train long enough, it's actually true. But what I found is that, you know, the body really follows that you get what you practice. And so I find that a lot of times when people practice, and actually neuroscience is really showing this, that really your brain adapts to what it has to do and what environment it has to face with. So let's say, for instance, for test taking, they found that if you study in a very quiet environment, and, you know, like kind of like where you can focus and things like that, and then you take your tests, like, you know, in a classroom environment, oftentimes people don't do it as well because they're not used to the noise, other people, the distractions. And so what they found is that you need to actually train yourself to take the test in the environment of what the test environment is going to be like. And so it's kind of like a similar idea, where if you don't train for what your life actually looks like, then you can't take your meditation over. And so you'll notice that one of the most common complaints that people have is just that I feel great after I meditate, but then as the day goes on, you know, the effects of the meditation goes away. And so Tai Chi actually did something really genius. It teaches you meditation, starting with standing meditation, and then it helps you, it makes you do the form. And so you learn how to maintain that meditative state. You learn how to carry that into movement, into daily life. And then it has to practice the sword form and things like that. And the reason you practice the sword form is actually, most people think it's because of the weapons. It's actually not for the weapon. It's actually just learning how to deal with something else so that you can maintain your meditative state. I mean, some people actually practice it for the weapon, but the broader reason is to be able to maintain your state and what you're training, your negong, your inner cultivation. So pushing hands, that's like the ultimate distraction of all time. You're literally pushing with someone else. And you start with gentle pushing, and then you become more and more competitive, and until you just keep actually increasing the complexity of it until you're doing sanso, which is called dispersing hands or free hand, meaning which is basically sparring, and you see whether you can maintain that state of mind and your energy while you're doing those things. So what I really like is you have the formal practice of just studying your state. And then once you calibrate into a more ideal state, then you do these other things so that you can see whether you can carry it over. So the Goal series actually has two purposes. It actually takes the fundamental, the most basic meditation, the space meditation, the space and light meditation, if you will. And then it has you take that through all the meditation or all the movements and the exercises. And it has two effects. One, it actually makes the exercises more effective over time. But then also, it helps you carry that state over into whatever else you're doing. And so it has a reinforcing effect. So that probably actually answers all of your questions. And so to begin with, in summary, number one, yes, you're supposed to follow your instincts and explore. But traditionally, there are three different things you can do for the yoga, which I mentioned: the alignment extension, the eye release method, and then the movement method. And then really actually, it carries over to the entirety of Negong system once you actually master the basics of those three things. And then kind of like looking at this from the perspective of the overall philosophy of form and pushing hands, meaning as in form is the self-cultivation to kind of, it's basically like just practicing layup by yourself. And then the interactive practices which is kind of like practicing your layup while you're in a more realistic situation where people are coming at you and you're increasing the complexity over time so that you can get your ideal layup no matter what is happening. So is that good? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was good. And I really appreciate the summary too. Just seeing it in perspective of like practicing these things like with increasing complexity is also helpful. It's like kind of giving me some self-compassion because I'm having a lot of complexity in general. So it's like unrelated, but I was like, oh, I'm getting to train under these circumstances. And that's also contributing to the busyness of my system. It's like, it's not just my system is busy, my system is busy under this kind of load. So that actually incidentally brought in a little more awareness. That was helpful.
Oh, good.
So thank you so much, Mr. Kim.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I feel like, Taoist practices follow this concept that, whatever it is you're practicing, what's already occurring in nature, and you're just formalizing that so that you can be reminded of the broader natural laws that are always active. So it doesn't try and teach you something it doesn't teach you something that's out of nature or magical, if you will. It actually just clarifies things, the ordinary, to such an extent where it becomes supernatural. So, it's kind of like, I've heard one master explain it as tai chi is natural, and when you understand it so well, then it can seem super, above natural, but it's just basically using what you understand about nature beyond what most people will understand it. And if you do that, that seems magical. But really, it's just actually just the normal things just done better. And so I feel like because the practices mimic nature, as you said, like the complexity, the growing complexity, I feel like, as you said, it really helps have a better perspective in life. And I think it's kind of like, it's like boxing analogies. People use boxing analogies for life, and then people use like, being in the ring, and then people use chess analogies, several, thinking several moves ahead or planning. It's kind of interesting. And so I feel like, in the same way, Tai Chi becomes kind of like a life analogy, cultivation becomes a life analogy. And that really actually helps oftentimes because, as you said, it just gives you better perspective of what's actually going on. So I'm glad that was helpful with finding some more self-compassion, because at the end of the day, that's really what we're seeking, because, what else is there? Cultivation, what are we really cultivating? We could really say, one of the most profound experiences that I've had that really aligns with what all the teachings say is that energy, the experience of energy, like feeling fully like engulfed in energy, is the experience of love, like just real, just profound love, the kind of oneness where you feel secure and like being held by a mother. And so when we say we're cultivating energy, I feel like oftentimes people look for, performance and superpower and things like that. But I would say that what we're cultivating is love. And so when you said self-compassion, I feel like that really just lines up really well. Okay, probably.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was really helpful.
Good. Yeah. I think the greatest benefit that personally, the more I train, is just finding more and more like just a sense of love. Just more and more self-compassion. And so anyways, okay. So anyone else have any other questions? We don't have a whole lot of time left, but anyone has anything they'd like to share or comment on or ask any quick questions to speed the time?
Yes, I had a couple shares. One is yesterday I was feeling the three dantians converging. And then this morning when we were doing the leg ups, just bringing attention to them and feeling that same sensation. And it felt like that circle was what was lifting my legs. It was cool. It was kind of like felt sort of like a point or like a circle outside of my body that was lifting the legs. So that was one thing. And then the other was my hips are continuing to speak to me. Last week it was about like how the lower back pain I've had is not actually about the lower back as much as it was about fear of injuring my hips. And then today it felt like I could feel how the tension that I have in my jaw is connected to the tension that I've had in my hips. And then just working with that throughout the Gold series. But then when you gave me the feedback about feeling the arms behind me sort of doing the same thing, it felt like that was releasing a lot of the tension in my head that hadn't been able to release. And I felt my jaw relaxing and my hip responding. So just interesting, the domino effect. So yeah, I wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You know, it really is amazing how the solution to the problems that we have is our path, meaning as in like what we do with our attention. You know, we're looking for a solution without trying to change the way we conduct our attention. But then when you changed your attention, it changed the way tension accumulates in your body, right?
Definitely.
And so it's kind of like the solutions that we're looking for. I feel like oftentimes the solutions that we're looking for is a result. Something we do once and then it solves it, like an adjustment, like if your shoulder's out of place and you need an adjustment, then if your shoulder is out of place, then getting an adjustment is important. But then what kind of path, meaning what habitual behavior caused the shoulder to be more likely to be out to begin with? Now, there are freak accidents, but most of the time, the accidents occur because of our tendencies. Let's say, for instance, if you don't play hockey, then you're probably not going to get a hockey injury. The likelihood of you getting a hockey injury is very low if you don't play hockey. And if you don't go to watch hockey, then it's even lower. And so the kind of injuries actually are determined by the kind of activities. And I hope that no one who's listening hears me saying, don't do anything in life, because everything in life actually can cause injury, including brushing your teeth. So it's not possible. So I'm not saying that, but I just wanted to just kind of bring attention to how where we place our attention really actually, habitually is actually oftentimes the solution we're looking for, without realizing that that is actually the problem, that the problem is actually where we place our attention. And just by actually understanding that, and that's one of the reasons why the precepts of all the meditative arts is in, there's nothing to do, only to see, meaning as in, oh, where am I placing my attention habitually, and what kind of a karma does it beget? And it's like a simple thing, but it's really deep at the same time. So anyways, so I just wanted to kind of just say that, because, as we're going about doing these things, that might actually help solve some of the things that we're going through. Okay.
Thank you so much, Master Kim. Yeah,
Well,
I can feel how the urge is for some kind of quick pressure release, feeling the pressure in my head. But actually, the most effective thing is to not pay attention to that at all, and to put my attention on something completely different. And then it's kind of frustrating, because it's not the kind of release that I want. It's not this like sudden thing where all of a sudden I feel better. It's like this gradual, sort of like steam coming off. But ultimately it's like that's the only thing that's that's working. So
yeah,
it's really deep.
it is really deep. I understand the frustration. I think that's actually, something that we get to have more compassion with as you go longer. Now, when something like that happens, and it's like it happens a lot less than it used to, but now when something like that happens, the gradual release actually helps me guide the path of my attention until it's completely corrected. And so but if you get a quick release, then you still don't know what causes, so you're gonna keep being in there. But if you decide, you know what, I'm gonna have patience with this until this really releases, then essentially it will not release until your attention is where it's supposed to be.
Wow.
And that was one of the biggest realizations I have for myself. And actually, the teachings always say that. The teachings always say, it's actually also in Buddhism, they talk about working out your karma. That's what working out your karma is. You stay on it until it completely releases. What that means is that you've learned how to really place the attentions where you're supposed to for the particular kind of pattern you're experiencing, where you're never going to have that kind of problem again. Right? And that's called learning. So another way to call basically, working on your karma is to learn. Is to learn where you're supposed to place your attention. And whatever issue you're having, if you just let it work out gradually, then the pain will guide you, will guide your way out of it. Because, if you that subtle release, okay, good. Then you look for the next subtle release, and then you look for the next subtle release, and those small releases actually add up, because what you'll notice is that when you have a pattern, it's a cumulative compilation of your personality that caused you to look at all the varying things. Like an anxious person, it's not just one thing that makes them anxious. It's 1,000 different things that makes them anxious. And so you need to basically undo those different things. And so that's where patience and study, like if you have a pain, where you don't look at it as a singular problem, but you look at it as a cultivation problem. That's why cultivation, I feel, is so powerful, because it is. That habit got cultivated into you, so you need to uncultivate it out of you. And the more you do it, you get better at it. But at some point, we got to do it. If you don't do it, then it doesn't resolve.
That's awesome. Yeah,
it is
thank
pretty
you.
awesome.
I mean, the landscape of it, I feel like you're talking about the wider landscape, but then also the micro landscape, like the little details that we don't even realize that we're doing that are, it's like the river shifting a tiny bit because of the placement of the rocks. And then if you just shift the rocks a little bit, like a half an inch, then the water will flow in a different way.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, well said. And I think you said it really well. I want to just end with this, because I think this is like critical. We're good at solving big problems because they're glaring in our face and they're obvious. The things that are really difficult to solve are the little things that we don't know that become an issue. Small habits that accumulate over time that becomes a bigger issue. And so because the small things don't seem so powerful, we ignore them because that's not a big deal. But it's a big deal. But it's the small things actually that always become a big deal. It's never the big things that become a big deal, because the big things are already a big deal. So you solve it. It's obvious. It's a one-time thing. And we're used to looking at problems like that because they're obvious. So when you come into a chronic issue, that's an accumulation. The reason chronic issues are so difficult to solve in general is because chronic issues is an accumulation of 1,000 little things. And so, it's kind of like, it's the small things that really does us in. And so by changing the small things, actually, it becomes very powerful. Now, if you, as you change the small things, there comes a point where you do one thing and it shifts over, and then people will say, oh geez, I wish I had known about this sooner. If it only, it would have gotten solved sooner. But sometimes that's true. Sometimes you're just having the wrong solution. But oftentimes what I observe more oftentimes that's actually really true is that it actually crossed over a certain threshold, and you did enough things right where it it started shifting over to the other side. It's kind of like on a lever. You're like, if you play, like if you're walking on a lever from one side of the lever to the other side, a seesaw, like a seesaw. So you start walking towards the center. All of a sudden, the moment you cross the center, it tips. And then when you cross over, it's downhill. But up until, you cross the center, it's uphill. And so just having patience and putting one foot in front of the other and one step at a time, I feel is so important, because it shows the value of changing the insignificant. And it shows the power of how the insignificant actually becomes a huge power. Most people don't realize that that's what people talk about when they talk about the flap of a butterfly's wing creating a tsunami. So anyways, that's probably a good place to end. I'm way overdue on time, so I gotta get going here. But
Thank you so
Thank-
much, Master Kim.
oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the sharing. So, okay, now you all have a great time noticing the small things and changing the small things and following your instincts, and have a great time cultivating. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Master Kim.
Thank you, Master
Thank you
Kim.
so
Welcome.
Happy New
much.
Year.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year.
Oh yes, Happy New Year. Thank you.